Hi everyone, thanks for joining us here today at Book Blather. If you're new here, I'm Dave, this is Olive, and we talk about books of all types to help spread the joy of reading. This month we've been reading a bit of horror. We've read a few other things, but we are focused on Horror Mayhem, which is a reading event where for the month of May, we focus on short works of horror fiction. Basically books that are under 250 pages or other short works. So what Olive and I have been doing for the month of May is we've been reading a book each week, and then we've been supplementing that with short stories as time permits. And a little something else crept in along the way that we did not expect. So we've been having a great time, and we will jump right into it. Today we are doing our wrap-up of week 3. So the book we read in week 3 is Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazzterica. Now, this book was originally published in Spanish in 2017, but it's a very popular book. It was translated in 2020, and so it's been making the rounds now the last couple years on BookTube. Now, if you're in the U.S., this is not the version you're seeing. Well, I'll put up the version that you see around here. This is the U.K. version. Sometimes, if you're been around, you know that sometimes we often think that the UK editions of books are sometimes a bit nicer, so sometimes we'll hunt those down instead, and that's what we did in this case. We thought this cover was a lot cooler, and it's got the French flaps by Pushkin Press. And so this book was brutal. It was really good, but it was really brutal. So what this story is about is this is set in a sort of a dystopian time, I guess, where all animals have been hit with a virus that has made them no longer edible. So the animals have actually had to have been eradicated. And so because there now is no meat available, consumption of human meat has become accepted and legalized. And so what you end up with in this book is you end up with a book that actually has a lot of commentary in it, but the book could have been twice as long. But in the context of a very engaging story, this was a real page turner. So in the very beginning, you meet this guy that he basically works at a processing plant. And this, it was a couple of good things about the I guess you would say the world building in this was that there was, when you have this world where consumption of human flesh has become acceptable, there are different different businesses or different industries that crop up associated with that trade, and different parts of the chain in that when that's involved. So you have the society where you're breeding and processing and selling humans. And so you kind of get to see those different businesses and how that's all done, which is pretty interesting, although horrific. And you follow this main character that he is basically the right-hand man to the owner of a prestigious processing plant. And so he has been, it seems to be very much anesthetized to this concept of, breeding and slaughtering human beings. But, he starts to get, certain things really start to agitate him as you go through the story. And so, of course, a lot of that's what the story is about is, in that kind of world, some people, it becomes too much for them and they break under the strain of what's happening. And so some of that is you're following our main character and kind of seeing what happens with him, and you're always kind of wondering, is he going to break? And so that's kind of like the engaging story that you go through. There's a lot that it's very, this book is very horrific in a number of ways. One is that you have to know this going in, because you have to be able to handle something that's really this brutal. is that there is very detailed discussion about the slaughtering process, and you really are learning. You really see all the different phases of the process, and the different things that happen, and different cuts of meat, let's say, without giving too much away. So it's really detailed and really graphic in that way. Also, what happens in the story, the way that other human beings are treated, and even the way the story ends. It's really rough. It's really rough. So this is one of those books that we would very highly recommend if you can handle this sort of horrific subject matter, because like I said, it is horrific in those several different ways, both in the graphic nature of what's described, but also just in terms of what is happening to human beings and how they're treated, and how people act towards each other. But it is a if you can handle all that, it is a remarkable story, and the world that has been built and the detail in that world is just really very fascinating. Now, this book was there was so much good about this book. I mean, it was also really just chock full of commentary. There was so much in this thing. There's, at the forefront, of course, is the obvious one, which is that, it was the obvious commentary about, us slaughtering and eating animals for their meat. And but by the time I was done reading this book, I almost want to become a vegetarian. So that's one very clear message that you're seeing in this book, that it's kind of turns it on its head a little bit and makes it, well, what if it was actually humans were the animals? But there's also so much more to this, because you basically have this society that is transformed by this practice that has become so well accepted, practice of cannibalism that has become accepted. And so there's so much more in here. There's there's a bit of classism going on in this book, because humans are bred and they're basically humans, but you kind of have these different classes of humans. So there's some of that's in there. There's a little bit of a 1984 vibe to this, whereas in terms of the when you have these government sanctioned practices, the oppressive nature of the government to govern what not only is the behavior that's done, but also policing what can even be said about it. It was very much of a sort of Big Brother sort of feel in that way. Just in terms of what how people can behave, and what when certain ideas that were unacceptable at one time have now become acceptable, when things become in fashion, when things become sanctioned by the government and become propagated throughout society. Just how things can change so much, and how people can become anesthetized to things. And it was just there was just so much in this book that it was really remarkable. So we would highly recommend this, just with that warning that going into it, that it is going to be a little rough. Honestly, this book probably could have been twice the size. That would be the only complaint that we would have about it. Was it was good, but it could have been twice as long, because a lot of those things could have been explored in further depth. And just even in terms of narratives that can be spun, and yeah. Oop, what's the matter? Sorry, you done talking about this book? Alice, I think, done talking about this book. We've droned on about it too long, but yeah, it's interesting, and the narrative voice actually is interesting in this book, and so you don't know, it's translated, so you don't know how much of it is the translation, but also it's told very matter of factly. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that we have a character that at least appears to be numbed to this, and you have all this sort of crazy brutality, that's being described to us throughout the story, and so it's all sort of told in that very cold, matter of fact manner, which was interesting. It was different. This is not a book where you're going to find a lot of beautiful prose in it. Not that kind of book, but it worked. It worked really well. It was well written, even as a translated work. I mean, it flowed very smoothly. So, really, really good book, and we would highly recommend it. And we've droned on about that one enough. So, in addition to that, as with each week, we supplemented with some short stories, and the short stories we've been reading are the H.P. Lovecraft, which we've been reading from this anthology, The Best of H.P. Lovecraft, blood-curdling tales of horror and the macabre. And so we didn't get too far this week. We read we actually read two stories, but one we didn't so much read. So that one was that we've been going in order through this. So we're still waiting to get to some of the famous ones. But first we read The Silver Key, and that was published in 1929 in Weird Tales, which many of Lovecraft's tales stories were first published in the magazine Weird Tales. And that one was, so when we started to read that, we saw that it was involved a character called Randolph Carter, which we recognized that. So then we went and looked it up, and there appear to be a number of stories by Randolph Carter that are part of I think what's called a Dreamland series or Dreamland sequence or something. And I think this was not the first. And the storytelling, it was particularly heavy. Now Lovecraft is a very lot of very, very great prose, so it's not like it's not very simple writing to begin with. This one was particularly heavy, so we ended up honestly kind of skimming it because we figured we're going to look into that more and probably read all those Dreamland stories with this character together. I'm sure we can find that somewhere. So we really didn't put too much into that one. So I mean, it was generally about this guy that it was seemed to be more of a philosophical work, and it was about this guy that seemed to think like a lot of life was about dreams, and then sort of became more about more about his practical waking life and science and things like that, and more of a materialistic, realistic nature, and then kind of going back and weighing whether life is really more about the memories from his dreams. So, I mean, that was kind of the story. That was kind of what it was about. Like I said, it seemed to be pretty philosophical, and I don't want to comment on it too much because we didn't really give it a fair reading. Because thinking we were going to go back and reread it with the other Randolph Carter story. So the other story which we read, which we really, really liked, was The Music of Eric Zahn. So that was published in 1922 in National Amateur. And that was another story. It's like a number of these stories from Lovecraft. We really enjoyed it, and it's hard to actually pinpoint why. I think it was just the storytelling. Lovecraft, we're discovering, has this real knack for really building the suspense and the creepiness and really ratcheting it up as the story goes on and culminating in really reaching this crescendo of scariness, and that's what happened in this one. And the story was about this guy that he couldn't find where he used to live, the street that he used to live on as a university student. And when he lived there, it was like across the river and up a hill, and he had been put in one of the last houses on like the third floor, and so he's pretty isolated. But then he started hearing eerie music from someone that was up on the top floor of this house. and I won't say any more than that. But it was really cool, and the creepiness really built, and it was just another one of those fun, like you're like, ooh, you're like like on the edge of your seat, and like a number of these stories now they read from Lovecraft, where it was just the reading, just the experience of going through the story was very enjoyable, because it like just the emotion that it causes to surge in you while you're reading it. So it was really cool. So hoping to read a few more this week, because we're hoping to read get through more of these Lovecraft stories. But part of why we didn't get a little further was because the other thing that has now crept into our horror mayhem, which we didn't intend, was horror manga. You may have, if you saw one of our videos a couple videos ago, we also discovered manga in the month of May. And so we just started reading, but we're really kind of into it. And so we also tried some horror manga, and we read, I guess it was last week, we had read and reviewed Ramina by Junji Ito. And so we were definitely interested in reading more of Junji Ito. And one of you recommended this one, Smashed. One of you recommended that we try one of his works that has a lot of short stories in it, and specifically recommended Smashed as one of those. So we gave it a try based on your recommendation. And we've read a few. We have a bit to go, but we've read a few of the stories in this so far, and are really enjoying it. I don't know, I put that up there so you can see it. And so, yeah, we're excited to keep going. It's hard to read other things and not keep reading this, but so. Yeah, we're enjoying it so far. We won't talk about the stories, but there's a number of short stories in here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 short stories in here. So we'll save the discussion of this book for the week 4 wrap up, when we will have finished this. So that was what we did week 3. We read Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Bazzterica. We read The Silver Key, sort of, and the music of Eric Zan from H.P. Lovecraft, and some of Smashed by Junji Ito. So if you have read any of these, please, and you have any thoughts, any comments on it, please let us know. We always love to hear from you. And if you don't want to leave anything substantive, you can always leave Olive a puppy emoji. She always loves to see those. It's late. Olive's really tired tonight, so I think she's kind of petered out. But as always, thanks so much for watching. We will see you very soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.